Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Phil Richardson. I'm the CEO of Black Opal Property Advisors. We're based in both Phoenix, Arizona, as well as in Toronto, Canada. And today we have a very interesting opportunity for us to learn from Kelly Laughton. Kelly is one of our subject matter experts who we have as a part of Black Opal. She's our Vice President of Site Selection, Merchandise Mix, and Leasing. And she works in both Canada and the US, and she's very knowledgeable, having been in our business for some time. And today we're going to talk about the variety of opportunities that we have as property developers and property consultants to bring about a conversion of retail projects, many of which are suffering these days for all the reasons we know, and loss of revenue is probably the most notable aspect. And what we have are a series of strategies to recommend, and Kelly is going to cover a number of them. Many of us have applied them, particularly Kelly. And what has happened is we have the opportunity to increase revenues in a way that can be quite impactful for us and can result in an increase in more stable revenues from a variety of different sources. So with that in mind, I wanted to introduce Kelly. And Kelly, if you wouldn't mind, I'd be very interested in hearing your opinion on the whole topic of mixed-use developments and how retail developments can be helped by the application of what we've got in mind. Go ahead, please, Kelly.
Well, thank you, Phil. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for that nice introduction. In the shopping center industry, we've had a lot of good times, and we've also had some rough times. And so dealing with a shopping center that is now in distress is not something new. We've dealt with this before. And having been part of a number of shopping center development companies in my shopping center career since the early 80s, we have lots of experience in methods with which to increase revenue. Now, mind you, I'm talking about shopping centers in those days that had stable revenue, but we always wanted to generate more. We wanted our retailers to do better, and we wanted the retailers to be able to pay percentage rent, which is, you know, if the landlord is collecting the percentage rent on a natural basis, that means that your retailers are doing well. And they usually don't mind forking out a little bit more, because if they're in percentage rent, they're doing well. So percentage rent these days has a different meaning. It's not like it used to be, because in those days, retailers were paying minimum rent or net rent plus additional rent. And then their sales were going up to a point where everybody was excited, and then they would pay even more rent. So landlords were excited, tenants were happy, life was good. So ailing shopping centers are not a new thing, though, because developers built some shopping centers maybe in the wrong place, maybe they had the wrong access egress, maybe they were in a market that everything changed and now the shopping center is ailing. So this concept of trying to find immediate revenue and ways to quickly improve the performance of an existing shopping center asset is not something new. So this is something that we've done, you know, having started off as a shopping center marketing director, I'm very familiar. What can you do in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days to increase the revenue? In these days, I fair say, and Phil, you and I have talked about this, there are landlords of shopping centers that are in grave circumstances and could very well lose their assets. And that's a very frightening situation to be in. So how do you, what do you do? How do you increase sales immediately? What do you do to get your asset bringing in revenue right away? Well, there are things that you can do. Even if your shopping center is empty, there are things that you can do. The thing is, there are organizations who would love to come into your shopping center to promote themselves. Organizations that we used to have, let's say it's the Antique Car Club, local Antique Car Club. Okay, so what can they do for you? Well, They want to grow, they want to promote themselves, and they probably want to sell memberships. So yeah, you can fill the shopping center up with antique cars. Okay, cool. Now at least you have an event. You have a reason for people to come back into the shopping center, A. Now, if your shopping center is completely empty, you don't have any tenants left, which is the possibility. Now you've got people coming back into the shopping center saying, hey, maybe we could do something there. So all of a sudden, just to bring it, like people, traffic in a shopping center is like the blood that goes through the body. And if you've lost your beating heart, which is your department store or the other retailers that were an important part of the mix, you need to find ways to bring the blood and the oxygen back into your shopping center. So even if you've lost all of your retailers, your anchor stores are gone, your food court's empty, your CRU tenants are gone, you can still move forward. Okay, the Antique Car Club, what do they want to do? They want to display their antique cars, but they also want to sell memberships. So let's say you work out a series where they bring their cars in, they do their display, there's, you do some advertising, they do some advertising, and then you let them have one of the units for a couple of days or a week or whatever makes sense for them to follow up and maybe just have one car in the space now and sell memberships. So this is just one example. And of course, we've all done, anybody in the shopping center industry has done car shows. But take the idea of cars to a bigger scale. For example, there's a shopping center in Edmonton, Alberta. It was at one time the world's largest shopping center. It's not anymore, but anyway, it is a big shopping center. It's called West Edmonton Mall. And recently they did a deal with Toyota for a 300,000 plus square foot car dealership. So the car dealership isn't just a display facility. It's a full service car dealership where you take your car there for servicing, etc. So imagine all the benefits. I don't know how many times I have had to wait 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours in order for the servicing to be finished on my car. So, what am I going to do in the meantime? Well, at West Edmonton Mall, I'm going shopping. I'm going for lunch. I'm going to spend money. So if we start to think about uses that we would never have had in the shopping center before, there's a whole bunch of things that we can do. And we have the experience. We've done these things. An antique car show is just one of probably 1,000 ideas that we have, because that's where we come from. We have for the last 30 years been looking for ways to increase revenue. We know how to do that. So that's what you do on the immediate basis. Now, what do you do for the medium term, the midterm? How do you start to revitalize and regenerate your shopping center? Well, let's talk about your anchor stores. You have a vacant Sears, for example, or a vacant Target, or some other large space, 200,000 square feet, maybe on 2 levels. What are you going to do with that? Okay, so how about an Amazon fulfillment center? Not just Amazon, there are others as well. A fulfillment center is a wonderful thing because your shopping center, in all likelihood, is very well positioned in the marketplace. And guess what? Warehouse space has become expensive and in high demand. So all of a sudden, here you have 200,000 square feet that you may only have had maybe, what, 450 net. And then anchor, not everyone's going to understand this terminology, but anchor rent for the additional rent. So that means that the anchor store, the Sears or whoever was the anchor, would have had a big discount on the realty taxes and a big discount on the common area maintenance charges. So in other words, the total rent that the landlord ever got anyway was maybe $4, $5 per square foot. So you know what? That's cheap for warehouse space now. Warehouse space is really expensive. So now there's an opportunity for you to be able to revitalize, and they're creating a fulfillment center. It's not like building a retail store. It's got some costs, I'm sure, but it's going to look different.
It's a white
And
box.
it's a box, and it's
A
probably
white
less
box, yeah.
a white box, and it's probably less expensive to build out than a retail
Absolutely.
store.
Oh,
Yeah.
very much so. Yeah, yeah.
So
May I ask you to pause for a minute, please, Kelly? You know, going back to the short-term solution today, because so many people are challenged, shocked would be a better word for it, by the fact that rent has been interrupted, that of course the flow of customers has been diminished to zero in most cases, and because of all of that, everyone's sitting there wondering, well, what's going to happen next? Well, the one thing is for sure is this situation is not going to be allowed to continue for a long period of time
right.
because we've got lenders who are seeking their typical coupons, investors who are seeking their particular returns. All of those sorts of energies are conspiring to bring about a need for change sooner than later. So what I think that our audience would like to know would be what solutions besides the fulfillment center can we apply again for the short term? And you and I have discussed, and we're talking about this with the application of ghost kitchens in defunct food courts that are empty, but fully fixtured and ready to produce in most cases. And with some relatively minor investment, that food court that might consist of as much as 10,000 square feet when you count in the common space for which seating was allocated, no longer is there seating there, which means that take the seating out and put a marketplace in there, for example, whilst people are waiting to pick up their food that may be offered by the different outlets that again are all fixtured and ready to go under the operation of one ghost kitchen. Now I've stolen a bit of your thunder, but I know that you're talking on behalf of ghost kitchens. You have clients who are ghost kitchens who with developers. What kind of reception are you getting from the developers?
Well, we actually have a client called Ghost Kitchens. They have
That's convenient.
they're called, and their concept is pretty cool. So it's a restaurant concept, but not the restaurant that we know. There's no seating, first of all.
Right.
But it's a good looking presentation. So it's a presentation that you'd be happy to have in your beautiful retail space that you want to lease. The concept is that they would have brands, and they do. They've got signed agreements with a number of brands that include Cheesecake Factory, for example, Taco Del Mar, for example, Cinnabon. So there's a whole bunch of them. And so you have the privilege of ordering from one menu, and all of these things will be delivered by Uber Eats or Skip the Dishes, or you pick your favorite delivery company that is operating in your territory. And this concept is growing very quickly. And there are different sizes. So 3,000 approximately to 3,500 square feet for the basic kitchen. They don't require exhaust hoods because most of the food is just prepared there, but there's no deep frying going on. And then they will be doing satellites. So the satellite locations are smaller. They're 1,000 square feet approximately, and they're in locations where there's walk up and probably nowhere for a car to pull up. So there's no delivery happening there. Now, the concept that you and I talked about for a shopping center owner and how to revitalize a food court. Now, a food court has endless number of opportunities for different menus. Let's say you've got 20 vacant food court units sitting in your formerly bustling food court that used to bring in a lot of revenue every year, and now it's sitting empty. So what do? Well, first of all, you got to clean it up. You got to make it look good. And there are operators out there that are capable of putting in a different menu in each of those former 400 square foot or 250 square foot food court units. All of the food court furniture is removed, and you're now dealing with the drivers who are coming in to pick up the order that's going to be shipped out to someone who's waiting in their home or whatever, or their workplace for the order. So it's a way for you to be able to, I mean, you have to have the right operator, and it's one operator, and there may be a sharing of revenue. There may be a percentage rent deal. There may be some base rent. It's whatever you can work out with that operator.
One check from the tenant to the landlord, which means the landlord's in a more secure position in respect to his income.
Exactly. And so with some investment, this is going to take some investment, but not a lot. You're not building a food court. You're not building a shopping center. You're not installing exhaust hoods. I mean, look at all that has already been invested in your food court. Take an assessment of it, find the right operator, and if you need help with that, call me, because we have those too.
Sure.
And look at a relatively short period to get that up and running, and there's revenue coming in.
And in fact, if it's a food court that's fully fixtured but vacant, by and large, you'll have most, if not all, of the equipment, including hoods, in place, all the really expensive stuff. That if food preparation was an aspect of the ghost kitchen's operation, that they could perform that as well. They don't just need the pre-prepared foods to function. Usually, a food court might be anywhere between 3,500 and 7,000 or 8,000 square feet of lease space, and roughly an equivalent amount of seating area. So that could be as much as 10 to 15,000 square feet of space, where the landlord either has a full vacancy or an invisible vacancy with an operator in place but not paying rent, and he could flush that out and end up with, again, one check coming to them on a reliable basis, and a very viable proposal that has some real strength, so that he knows that next month he's not going to have to reinvent the solution again.
Oh, you're so right. So we have a whole bunch. We've been brainstorming all sorts of ideas, and some of these things we've done before. Many of these things we've done before, because this is not the first time in the history of shopping centers that we have had shopping centers that have gone through hard times.
Yes.
So we know how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we should talk about the longer term as well. So revitalizing that food court and getting that, it might not be the prettiest thing, and you might not be truly enamored with maybe how it looks, but it's making money, and it might make the bank stop bothering you. So wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, I mean, that's to be desired, of course. But the fact is that you end up with plugging one of the holes that allows you, as a building block, to begin creating new revenues on a planned basis, and that's something the lender wants to know. If their confidence is going to be maintained in you, that you've got a plan, and so that plan, can begin with the relatively short-term strategy that we've just talked about, where you could imagine in 60 to 90 days you could have that kind of tenant operating in place. That's pretty short-term and encouraging, because, say, 10,000 square feet of space generating, I'm going to speculate, $10 to $20 per square foot net, let's say, can all of a sudden the bank sees some fairly impressive checks coming in. And so it begins to rebuild the confidence they have in you. Don't forget, there's a lot of people who are just going to be sitting there staring at the problem and not doing something about it.
Exactly. So when you take this, the idea of thinking outside of the shopping center, so to speak, you think also about manufacturers. Now, manufacturers of products, have traditionally, sent their products out through a middleman, a wholesaler, and then eventually it got to the retailer, and eventually it got to the end consumer. Well, with what has happened over the years, part of that's dried up. The retailers weren't paying the wholesalers, and the wholesalers weren't paying the manufacturers. So guess what? Manufacturers said, we'd like to make our products and sell them ourselves. So, hey, let's go online. But what happened? Nobody went to their website. Why not? Well, because nobody knows them. Why not? Well, because they're manufacturers. They're in an industrial building somewhere in some small town. So all of a sudden, imagine if you had, let's say your shopping center is in a rural area where there's lots of farmers. How about you fill your shopping center up with farm equipment? Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do something we haven't done before.
Sure.
Let's work with manufacturers. For example, I can think of, we all know Dyson. They've been marketing like crazy. So
Yeah,
Dyson,
good job.
Dyson have created some experiential stores. And if you go into the Dyson store, you will find an employee that knows a lot. Now, this is not a retail store in a traditional way. This is a store that's owned by the manufacturer. And the manufacturer has trained the salespeople so they understand not only about the product, but about the manufacturer and about the warranties. And so what they'll do is when you go to that store, you get to experience the product. You know, it's hair straightener is what I need, or vacuum cleaner, or whatever the product is that you're excited about that Dyson makes. And they're going to tell you everything, and you're going to experience the product. And then they're going to order it, or you're going to order it there in the store online. It'll get delivered to your home. So you're not dragging that thing through the shopping center. So, you know, manufacturers have a wonderful opportunity to be able to connect with the end user through shopping centers. Now, let's say you do a demonstration of your product, or you're a manufacturer, and now you're demonstrating your product, but now people are coming back and saying, hey, you know, you had that demonstration here. So now that manufacturer can take over a unit that has been cleaned up and prepared. It's not a long-term lease, but it's a short-term lease, and they're selling product and they're connecting with their client base. So all of a sudden they're getting value, and they can pay some rent to the landlord.
Yes.
So this is just one other example of creative use of your common area space, and then subsequent use of your vacant CRU space, and how one by one, yes, it's going to take some time and it's going to take some work and effort, but you get to keep your shopping center and make the bank happy. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Well, and a certain refinement is thought, it brings up an important element here, and that is because a lot of people have basically said, well, you know, I'm bringing you in as a landlord as a demonstration area. How do I profit from your online sales? And, you know, with certain reliable tenants, you can actually cut a deal with them that there's some form of value exchanged by that tenant for those solicited tenant customers who come about because they've been in the demonstration center. So there are methods by which you can monetize that presence as well, which is important for the landlord, of course.
Absolutely. When the order is placed from that retail store, there can be a notation on that email from that customer employee that says, okay, yes, you know, this order came from White Oaks. So we know that shopping center called White Oaks is where that order came from. So
Sure.
It's like working out a percentage rent deal.
It is, and it's also got some marketing value because it encourages the manufacturer that they're getting a benefit out of their store presence, right? You know, I had an experience when I was working as an executive consultant in China, where I produced a customer satisfaction center for a super regional mall. And what that consisted of was a 5,000 square foot space, prominently located, which had a Starbucks as a part of it, soft seating in it as well. And really, this was the gathering point for people both online and offline who were interested parties in the shopping center as customers, let's say, or as visitors. And so what happened was we located all of the marketing staff of the shopping center in that location so they would have a direct senior interface with the customers, therefore know what's there on their minds. We also had all of the social media represented there because in China, notwithstanding the fact there's 700 or 800 million people on Weibo, it means that they're missing 600 million people. And so, you know, they had an opportunity to sell their service to get those people online in person, which is the way to do it, of course. So all of that commercial activity that was going on made that whole facility self-sustaining financially. And its big advantage was that it, in fact, did serve as the platform for what we call O2O marketing, in that, for example, they would bring together all of the tenants in the shopping center to do a collective, and you and I would know this in the old days as co-op advertising, right? And and they would bring together a collective initiative online through various of the social media platforms. When they put out, let's say, group advertising, it was very powerful, just as was co-op advertising in its day. And when people received it, they would get an encouragement as an online user to, they would get a $20 coupon to come into Gap and pick up their product that they are then going to order online. So they come and pick it up. Perhaps it's faster delivery, maybe. But more importantly, they get to upsell that customer with in-store merchandise. So the result was, firstly, it was seen as a much improved service to all customers, whether online or offline. And secondly, it moved them in great numbers. The result was the shopping center did extremely well compared to its competition. And so, there's these creative ways that you can lead into as the landlord in generating more sales and certainly more encouragement for your retailers.
That is such a good point, Phil. So I think you really hit on something important. And Danielle, of course, was talking last week about the customer experience, reinventing the customer experience. And I think one of the most tremendous things that shopping centers have and still have to offer that online retail does not is a physical presence where there's the opportunity to relate on a human scale with your clients, and the opportunity to be able to build a relationship between the retailer and the retailer's tenant. And online retailers are very aware of the power of that relationship because it's something that they don't have. So here's an opportunity for, again, for good marketing people or shopping center owners to reach out to online retailers, and they may have, who knows how many connections or customers they have in your town. Let's say they've got 10,000 customers in your town, and now they're coming into your shopping center, they're doing a demonstration, they're having a sale, they're inviting their customers, and those customers are coming into your shopping center because of that online retailer. So now you're working synergistically. And again, as you mentioned, there can be the opportunity for a sharing between the landlord and the tenant of a percentage of the online sales.
Sure. We've been talking around this all through our discussion, but at the end of the day, both of us recognize that fundamentally nothing happens in the absence of a sale. So said Tom Watson, the legendary IBM president. Nothing starts until a sale is made, he said. And really what that speaks to is obviously the customer-centric model that we have to have. And so what we're talking about is accessing that customer in a far more potent multi-channel way to mobilize them. And it generates my favorite term, which is an unfair share of the market that the particular operator, and this 1.6 million square foot regional I was describing in Guangzhou rather, in China, got an unfair share of its market as a result of this interface. Let's talk a little bit more, now that we've talked about money in the short term, let's talk about money in the midterm. Like there's some middle term strategies that take longer to deploy. And you're particularly familiar with them because you took a Target store, I think it was 140 or 160,000 square feet.
157,000 square feet.
Yeah, and
Big.
you introduced into it a viable operator who is very strong and represents what we all know to be the bread and butter, shall we say, of retail. Why don't you tell the story about the remodeling of the Target store?
Thank you. Target came to Canada in 2016, I think.
Something like that.
And 2 years later they left, and in the meantime they opened up 128 stores. How they did that, I don't know. That's unbelievable that they managed to do that. Unfortunately, they didn't get it all right and it didn't work, so they left. Anyway, they left some wonderful leasing opportunities. Thank you, Target. One of them is in downtown Toronto West, and one of my company's clients is a company called Nations Fresh Foods, and it is a multi-ethnic grocery store. And in Canada, we are extremely multi-ethnic, and in the Greater Toronto area, we're particularly multi-ethnic. And the existing grocery stores, many of which are wonderful grocery stores, weren't really getting it. I mean, they had a bit of, the older products of previous generations of immigration, but they weren't on top of the latest and the newest waves of immigrants. And this particular grocery store chain took advantage. So the landlord at that time was RioCan. They still are. And they wanted one tenant. And guess what? It's like, where do you find 157 square foot tenant? There aren't any. So we took it. My client took the space. They built a grocery store that was approximately 95,000 square feet, but they added something interesting to the grocery store. They had about 10,000 square feet of prepared foods. So the prepared food section, there was a buffet hot table and a series of, there was a lot of Asian, Oriental, Chinese food, and then there's the Western food section. So they've learned how to do both of those categories. So they do, pizza and hamburgers, and they also do Chinese barbecue and dim sum, my favorite. And they're really good at that. But they also added an entertainment aspect, approximately 15,000 square feet of a concept they called Happy Kingdom. And it is split approximately half and half between a children's mega playground, kind of like what you see at McDonald's, but much bigger. And in addition to that, the latest version of a, what do you call them, video arcade. Modern, clean, fresh, and the latest in games, coin-operated games. And it was just so successful. They wished they had made it twice the size that they did, and then they would have had to switch where they put it. So anyway, live and learn. But what did they have to do with the remainder of the space? Because 157,000 square feet, now we got 50,000 square feet approximately remaining. What do we do with it? So the plan was to sublease, and we've subleased almost all of it. There's still a little bit left to services mostly. Definitely retailers or businesses that were in the neighborhood that would bring families. So the great thing is there is a gymnastics school, Olympic level. There is a 25-year-old children's dance school that moved in, a 10,000 square foot medical center with not just doctors, but a whole bunch of other health-related uses in a composite of health uses, and a pharmacy. And then some other ethnicities of food users, and the usual hair salon, nail salon, that kind of stuff. So it was it took a lot of effort. We worked hard to make it happen, but it's still very successful. Even through COVID, it's been successful. And that's something that you can do in the medium term with revitalizing your shopping center, because I tell you, a grocery store like this is like a beating heart. I mean, it is really a great draw. And if you've got a shopping center and you've got an opportunity to put in a multi-ethnic grocery store like this in 100,000 square feet, now you're going to have a new beating heart in your shopping center.
Well, that's such a good point. And the interesting thing is, imagine RioCan at that time, and I'm not gonna put you to any numbers here, but I'll do a little speculating if you don't mind. We're probably getting $5-6 a square foot out of that space from Target. Let's say $5, so I can do the math. So they were sitting there with about $800,000 worth of income annually from that space. I'm going to speculate, but based on the kind of volumes that I know supermarkets do, and notwithstanding their slim margins and so on, I would imagine that that money was at least replaced, and probably beyond that, because there is I'm not sure which party got the money, and again, you don't have to say it, whether it was Nations or whether it was RioCan, but that ancillary space is like a mini shopping center where understandably more money came in on a per square foot basis from those collateral service uses. So on the round, it's probable that that $800,000 is actually greater than that. And again, I'm not asking you that, but so now in today's world, a developer has a vacant department store of that size and follows that strategy. And while that strategy might take a year or two to fully deploy, get operational, the result of it is they end up with replacing a big hole in their financial matrix from that shopping center. And once again, their lender, who today is going to have to play a role because most developers can't splash out as much as they might have wanted to in the past. And so that their confidence is reinforced once again, because there's a medium-term solution that the lender can say, you know what, I've seen what Kelly does. Why can't I do it here? And so, again, Kelly, you've got the secret sauce. You've had the experience of doing it. And one of the things that a lot of developers are concerned about, and this leads into the longer-term solution with the mixed-use development, is the strangeness, if you want to put it, the fear they might have that if they want to bring in a multi-family element, whether it's rentals, whether it's seniors, whatever it might be, and they don't have the experience of doing it, there's a lot of risk in their own minds about the possibility of failing. And it's so important to get right the integration of these facilities. The way I put it is people have to make sure the doors are in the right places, right? And, I know it sounds fairly basic, but yeah, if they're not, it doesn't work. And it's more complex than that. Having people with the experience that you do, I do, our colleagues do, in being able to bring this to fruition is a reassurance to not only the landlord and developer, but also to the lender that they're going to be asked to put forward some money to support these developments, that it's money well placed, and that they can reasonably see a path by which this formerly really successful shopping center, but unfortunately with the change in the retail landscape, no hope of restoring that necessarily, is on a pathway to success through adding these mixed use elements. Now for the real big home run, I want to talk about, you to talk about the addition of the residential, for example, and in fact, there's other creative uses that you and I've talked about. But again, I personally, done mixed-use developments that have very large retail and residential components, and of course, they obviously provide an additional market for the retailer. They provide an additional source of revenue from other sources for the landlord, and therefore make the combined returns more robust and more sustainable. And so these developments might take as much as 3 years or even more to introduce. Let's say 2 to 3 years is the window. Why don't you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Phil. If your shopping center is in a good location, if you don't have issues with access egress, that's a good thing. I might suggest that you even have a shopping center that's in a great location. You may have an exit ramp off the highway. You may have transit that comes to your shopping center. You may have bicycle paths and walking paths and all sorts of wonderful things, but still your shopping center is empty. Why? Why is that? Well, a whole bunch of reasons, right? We know why, lots of reasons, especially COVID. That's another thing in its own. But anyway, so how do you take advantage of all of these pluses? You know you've got a good asset, but what do you do now? Didn't you already have a mixed use in your shopping center? Of course you did. So what is all this discussion of mixed use? What is this? Well, okay, our values have changed. We have changed. So the way we used to live and work and what we used to think was valuable has changed. So if you were thinking that there might be an opportunity for you to add, let's say, for example, 2 towers. Let's talk about something that Phil has actually done. He's got experience doing this more than once. So let's talk about a seniors apartment complex over here, and let's talk about an assisted living facility over here. On top of 2 levels, a 2-level podium that provides the services to those towers. Now imagine that as either as attached to or as part of somehow or other your shopping center. Now we have the opportunity to re-merchandise the shopping center to be something new and different and special. Maybe it provides an opportunity for an educational facility. Maybe there's a chance to build one of those well-needed colleges that teach trades, the trades that everybody's, I mean, have you tried to find a plumber recently? I mean, it's the same price as trying to find a surgeon. It's like, wow, hard to find a plumber. So we need more plumbers. We need more electricians. We need to have the education. And so a college, a school, a facility of worship. The shopping center has traditionally been a facility where we could do all sorts of things. And now if we've got, let's say we've got a space where you could build a beautiful, let's say, theater. What could that theater be used? Or maybe you've got a theater. Maybe you've got a former movie theater sitting there,
cinema, yeah.
sitting there empty. What could you do with that? Oh my God, so much. Okay, so it can become an educational facility. It can become a place of worship. It can become a facility for umpteen things that are now endless reasons for people to come back to the shopping center. Now you've got people living there. Now you've got people coming to visit people who live there. And ideally you have a grocery store. So never underestimate the value of a grocery store.
Well, that's a very fundamental building block for sure. And I think a lot of people buy into that notion. I think that, to step back a moment to again give the reassurance to the owner as well as to the lender of the likely positive outcome of doing such a thing by performing the right kind of research that is available today. It's really important. That one of our colleagues, for example, is David Allison, who's the inventor. He's a genius, really, of value graphics. And so
really
what he does is through over 500,000 surveys worldwide, with 400 questions answered on the basis of each person who they've interviewed, their values, he's able to fit together a profile that tells you who are the people and in what number within your market area who constitute this collection of values, who respects that combination of values.
Indeed.
So when it comes time to craft what it is that you're going to do to approach them, you first go and find out the answer to that question. Then you curl around and you radiate that message back out to people. They say, "Oh my God, there's the perfect place," and they'll consider, for example, a residence there. They'll consider any number of the services that are offered. So research and development is a very, very important part of the initial process. So you're not shooting in the dark.
True. So true. Phil, you just hit the nail on the head, and that comes really before anything else. That's where you start.
Yeah.
And once you've gone through that process and the process of visioning, and that will help you with your visioning process. Something that I've written in my book, my second book, called "The Shocking Truth of the Future of Shopping Centers."
Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
When is that coming to press?
That'll be out this year. I don't know. It's coming.
Wonderful.
Soon.
That's
coming
news.
Soon. Yeah, thank you.
Can I also make another plug? Kelly is a very valuable co-author of a book, a collective book that we're issuing again early this fall called Vertical Villages, the Future of Mixed-Use Development. David Allison, Kelly, myself, and a number of other subject matter experts each talk about their particular area of expertise. Danielle Papillon for consumer relationships, Ahmad-Shah Duranai for his project management skills, and all of us have had international experience as well as domestic experience in applying these, so we know something about how to do what we're paid to do. And that book is going to become I think, a handbook for the industry that'll help people to understand what needs to be done. But even once they understand it, they really need somebody to help take them by the hand to reassure them they're doing the right things. And of course, that research piece is very important.
You know, you're so right, and I realize that here we are preaching to the choir, but hopefully there will be others that you know that can benefit from our experience. Having gone through understanding the values of your target market, and you know, so often, you know, in the beginning the retailers would say to me, I'd say, who's your target market? They'd say, oh, everybody. Well, you know, if you think everybody's your target market, you don't know who your target market are, because not everybody is your target market.
Yeah.
And the important thing to know, what was I going to say? When you get the retail aspect of your development right, so let's say you're starting with raw land, or you've ripped down a warehouse and it's been rezoned. If you get the retail commercial part of the development right, that sets the mood and the tone and the branding for the entire development.
Mm.
On the other side of that coin, if you get it wrong, need I say more?
And there it is for 100 years. So you're either proud of it or ashamed of it for 100 years. That's a long time. You know, I think there's two other important aspects here. And one of them has to do with the money. It's always about the money. I'm sorry, I keep defaulting to that. But and I'm going to invite Eduardo Reyes, who has joined us, who's an appraiser, to hi, Eduardo. To talk a little bit about this. And I know this is an unexpected request, Eduardo, but you know, I think the gist of what you're getting is that we have a formula by which we can follow that will result in people being able to reconstitute their cash flows, which obviously flows dramatically into what you do, which is you're called upon by lenders and others to value a property based on, you know, both existing and forecast cash flows. And so in today's market, it's pretty confusing because you don't even know if there's going to be cash flow for some of these projects. And it's one thing to have a physical appraisal done, and that's nice, but you really want to know, how it's going to perform. So as an example, I'll leave this in, is these elements that we're talking about adding, let's say a seniors continuum of living, complex. Most people may not appreciate it, but the kind of IRRs that are expected out of that form of development element is 35 to 40% per annum. 35 to 40%. Now compare that to what the likely single-digit IRR is for a lot of shopping centers that has arisen out of more and more aggressive buying practices and so on. And you add that into the cash flow. Now you're called upon to do an appraisal, and you say, yeah, look what effect that has on the future value of this project once it's completed. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so I think I love all the ideas that you guys are discussing, and I think they are definitely very future thinking, very creative, and there definitely will be things that we would take into account on our end, on the appraisal side, which I think would definitely help positively. For sure. We've had a lot of concern, as we were speaking earlier in the past couple of days. We've had a lot of concern in terms of vacancies in a lot of different commercial sectors, particularly retail and office, obviously with the current COVID. And having these creative models, which I think create, I think they're great. You're creating the supply and the demand within the same complex, which I think is very much self-sustaining. It's less risky in terms of external market factors outside of the complex itself. So I think these ideas are great. And from a
I just interrupted and say, Eduardo, these are more than ideas. We've done them. We've actually,
right. Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah.
they work.
Actually, I'm looking at the formula rules are right behind you there, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And it's that's one of my favorite examples of creating both an entertainment center and a retail space. And so I love the way you guys are thinking about it from value standpoint and going into it's just, I think it's great. And again, that idea of creating both the demand and supply for within the same complex, I think lends itself to a very favorable valuation.
Yeah,
Which
that's
is,
so important to reassure the lender that they're not putting good money after bad in the recreation of the project, because they're going to be presented with so many portfolios that have these big holes in them. They've got to come up with positive solutions. Ideally, they would be able to deal with the existing owner and support that existing owner, but they're only going to do that so long as the owner has a valid proposition to make. Otherwise, they're going to say this is just not going anywhere, and so we're going to have to take it back. Well, you know, that's tragic for the originator of these projects. So, you know, you play a very important role in that process and being able to understand what the benefits are of doing these things and the likelihood that they'll come about. You know, there's some other elements that we've considered, and today this may sound a little strange, but the application of self-storage in the presence of rental apartments, for example, when they tend to drive the use of the self-storage. Well, today self-storage buildings are being created. They look like Class A office space. You know, they're beautiful, and they you know, they fit definitely into the model aesthetically, but they also provide a real service. And here we are again. They have an IRR between 30 and 40%. So, you know, imagine how, you know, those impact the cash flows you're going to be looking at when it comes time for you to report to the lender, this is either a good idea or a bad idea. Well, I contend it would be a good idea, because retail, apart from the kind of retail that Kelly is talking about, that goes a ways towards restoring the value of a property, but it doesn't tell the whole story. That's one department store of a whole lot of space. So there's got to be a sort of a global concept. And the other ideas that Kelly was talking about, for example, education and so on, those are also synergistic. It's known that more and more evidence is gathered that the intergenerational benefits of mixing seniors with students is very, very positive. And so once again, you can imagine how that would work. So at the end of the day, a lender might be looking at a 5-year program where for maturity, they see these various steps being taken. And so a lot of retail developers are afraid that, you know, the kind of ads that they've heard about insofar as mixed use development have been the long-term ones, the kind we're talking about now. And they say to themselves, God, it's going to take me 2 or 3 years before I see the benefit of that. What am I going to do in the meantime? Well, we've answered that question. There's a 90-day solution, 180 days, 365, and so on.
Yeah.
And so it's progressive. So Kelly, you know, we're nearing the end of our interview, and thank you very much for participating. Thanks, Eduardo, for your comments.
Thank you.
What can you sum up based on what we've been talking about?
Sure, Phil. If you are a shopping center owner and you're looking for solutions, we have many. Depending on your situation, we have first of all a broad and varied collection of experts, subject matter experts. You're not seeing them all today right now. So we're able to roll out a menu of talents and skills that, as Phil has noted, these are not just ideas. You know, these are actual experiences that we have had, and we know how to execute them. So depending on your situation, depending on how many retailers you still have in your shopping center, how much revenue you still have, if you're looking 4 months down the road and you've got some serious concerns about what's going to happen with the future of your shopping center, please call us. We can help you.
Thank you for that, Kelly. It's true, you know, and not only what we're doing is something that, of course, all of us do it for economic return, but at the same time, you know, by essentially recreating a development that had its glory days into something that is more suitable to a community, we're actually making a social contribution to that community. The fabric of communities, many of them are really based on the presence of these big shopping centers. They're big economic drivers and so on. So municipalities, we didn't get to this, but just I'll leave a one sentence comment on it. Municipalities are going to be required to make the approvals that will bring these about. Of course, zoning changes have to be entertained and processed, but once they understand this story as well, they're going to say, what a wonderful thing is going to be arising for our community. And they will work with developers to provide those approvals, and not on a lengthy basis like we've experienced before. They know they've got to move quickly as well.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? There's one more point I'd like to.
Please.
Thank you, Phil. We were talking, and one of the things that I suggested was I would like to, and I'm going to be doing this shortly, going out on social media, Facebook and LinkedIn for sure, just to invite individuals, people, just if you know of a shopping center in your community that you think is valuable enough, well-positioned enough, and you care about enough about that shopping center, send us a video. Send me a video of your shopping center. And we're going to be looking at a number of these videos that come in, and we're going to be focusing on putting together a group of developers and financiers to redevelop that shopping center to see what it could be now and for the future. So if you know of a shopping center, or you know someone that has a community, or if you're in a community council, if you're a mayor, if you're an economic development officer, if you have a shopping center that you think needs to be redeveloped, please contact us, because we're going to be focusing and choosing one or two, or however many projects we can handle, and redeveloping them.
Well, that's a wonderful concept. And again, it plays to the corporate social responsibility that we all have to our communities. People can reach us through our Black Opal website and emails. It's www.blackopalpa.com. And of course, Kelly's email is kellyl@blackopal.com, pa.com. And mine is philr@blackopalpa.com. And you can reach the rest of us similarly by simply applying our names to the website. The result of that is that we'll respond, and we'll end up getting back to people, so that you'll definitely have a response from us, and we'll tell you what we think is possible to do. We also offer a free hour-long consultation for developers who are curious to know how they can go about doing what is necessary, and in fact, even knowing what that is. And so we try to build trust and communication with our prospective clients, so they can rely upon us and bring about the kind of change that is going to be good for them and for everybody. So I want to thank everybody for coming today. And Kelly, thank you so much. You've lent a lot of your wealth of knowledge to all of us. And I think the result of that is that good things will happen. We know that. And you know, there's a positive message here. So many people are fearful because of CV-19, and I quite understand that. But at the same time, there are solutions, and we have to collaborate on those solutions, and we're willing to do that. So thank you, everybody, for your time and attention. And thank you, Kelly, for your great presentation input. And thank you, everyone, for coming. Hope you have a nice day. Bye for now.